Okay, welcome everybody to our first plenary session for the Ignite Innovation Showcase. My name is Jim Oliver. I'm the director of the Student Innovation Center here, and it's my pleasure to kick this event off. I'll be your master of ceremonies throughout the week, an occasional judge, and just man about town here. It's been a crazy day already. Lots of activities throughout the building, almost all afternoon and into this evening. And it's just been a wonderful kickoff to the event today. But the special part is happening right now. We're really thrilled to have two great keynote speakers, and we'll have an awards announcement for our Change the World Challenge that went on this afternoon, so that'll close out this session. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, the Dean of the College of Design, Professor Rico Gutierrez. Luis?
Thank you. So I'm going to begin with a little personal story. I was born in Querétaro, Mexico. That's more or less in the central part of the country. And when I was a little bit younger than you, 1982, I was about to transition from high school to the university. I did a small trip with my friends, so all the way we're going to Austin, Texas to visit some friends. As we crossed the border in our car, we stopped in the first Radio Shack. I'm dating myself. Radio Shack we actually found right across the border. And the reason was we needed to find a TV monitor because there was this thing called MTV that had started the year before. It was an amazing cultural thing. I mean, video and music together really transformed how we think about culture, at the time. Interesting enough, I got to my friends' houses, and the year before MTV started, BET, Black Entertainment Network, started in 1980, if I'm correct. And for me, the power of the voices, to see something different, media was an extremely powerful message that for me, I will say, changed the way I think. I think changed the way society looks right now. I think it will be easy right now to take for granted the work of some of the people that disrupted the world at that time, and that is what we're going to be hearing about today. Louis Carr has been with BET for 35 years, so that probably was very young, 6-7 years after opening its door, serving as the president of media sales for the last 19 years. During his tenure with the company, he has transformed the multicultural space for some of the world's biggest brands through strategic partnerships with corporations like Procter & Gamble, McDonald's, General Motors, Apple, and many more. And again, remember, they are shaping how we perceive culture, and they were shaped by those interactions with Louis Carr. Carr's long-term commitment to young people and his community led to the creation of the Louis Carr Internship Foundation, which helps improve diversity in corporate America through paid summer internships for undergraduate students of color. He recently founded Waymaker to help people make a way for themselves and others to grow their lives and change the world. Carr is an innovator in residence for the Student Innovation Center and the sponsor for the Change Market Innovation Sprint. Please join me in welcoming a disruptor, Louis Carr. This is for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have one? I think you're wired up.
No, they changed, and they said that you made them change. All right.
I'm changing it again.
You're changing it again.
That one's cut.
All right. Thank you. I want to thank everyone here, from faculty to students to alumni, for allowing me this opportunity to come before you today. Now, I must admit, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't do like I did, commit to something, have no idea how you're going to get there, where you're coming from. So the last 2 weeks have been very hectic on my staff in trying to get me here and get me out of here because I have a meeting tomorrow, all right? Now, I went to school right up the road at Drake University, so I'm assuming that, don't do this. I'm assuming things were like they were in the old days. They're not. There are a very limited amount of flights into Des Moines and even less out of Des Moines, all right? So this has been challenging, but I'm glad I'm here. It's exciting for me, and I want to thank Karen especially. I thought I was going to see Karen in person today, but I really want to thank her for allowing me opportunity to work with the innovators on their projects throughout last semester. And the thing that was confirmed to me is that educating, teaching is a two-way street. Because I learned just as much as I was trying to teach about leadership and innovation. I came out of it a different person. I came out, I think, a younger person. At least I hope that was one of my goals. And it was very, very, very exciting for me. And I want to thank the students for allowing me to show up with my authentic best self at the end of work days. So thank you guys so very, very much for that. The number one question that has been asked of me over the last several years is, how did you keep that job for so long? That's been asked by young people, old people, people in the industry. Like, you know, when somebody says that they've had a job and it's close to, in a few months, it'll be 36 years. So I'm 35 years in about 8 months now. It'll be 36 very, very soon. I've been trying to leave over the last year, but they've asked me to stay. But the question has been, how do you keep a job that long? And why do you keep a job that long? And it's really sort of connected to innovation. It's connected to change makers. It's connected to changing the world. As I said, I have one of the best jobs on the planet. One of the best jobs on the planet. Not only is it about celebrities, that's the least of it, but it gives me the opportunity to give people opportunities that they may not get elsewhere. And I realized probably about 20 years ago, that was my real purpose. I tell this story. I was sitting in my office looking out the window, and it happens to be a great office. It looks over the city of Chicago, the lakefront park, and everything else. And it hit me. This is your purpose. This is the opportunity that you have, is to give young people opportunities that they may not get elsewhere and to guide them along the way. That's why I started my foundation. That's why I started Waymaker. That's why I started my podcast. That's why I started my conferences, to give people information, to give people guidance, mentorship that they may not get elsewhere, so they can at least be as good as I am, but hopefully better. So today I want to talk about the journey to excellence. The journey to excellence. I've had a professional career probably that stands 4 decades now. To say the least, I've had starts and stops, say the least, ups and downs, losses and wins, and several hurdles. It hasn't been easy. But I was thinking about what were the keys whenever I had a loss, or whenever I had to stop, or whenever I had to do something different. What was those keys that sort of helped me, that sort of relates to this building? And there are several, and I'm going to kind of walk through them today. The first one was a new vision. Most people think they get one vision in life, to do one thing in life. Wrong. Wrong. If you've only got one vision to do one thing, you haven't opened yourself up to the possibilities. You don't know how big the world is. I got a degree in journalism, okay? And I've just started using that degree a couple of years ago when I created this, all right? You have to open yourself up to new things, different things, in order to have great visions. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, which we were talking about upstairs, with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, I was talking to the professor here who's from the great state of California, and I'm like, how you like Iowa, all right? And I wanted to know what was the DNA difference between the state of California and the state of Iowa. But really, he has brought some of the state of state of California's DNA here to the state of Iowa. You have to open yourself up to different experiences to have great vision. Now, when I came along, Elvis, I didn't have the internet, which I think is the greatest invention of the 21st century, all right? I'm old, but I still get excited every time I open up a computer or iPad. I'm one of the world's best Googlers. Trust me. I mean, I Google everything. I'm Googling all day long. I meet somebody. Who are they? How much money do they make? Where do they live? I'm one of the world's best Googlers because I'm curious. I'm curious. Every time I meet somebody new, I want to know. I'll be Googling you when I get in the car tonight, all right? We share almost the same name, so I got to go say, where did he come from? What did he do? Who's his family? Curiosity helps develop vision. We have to have vision. I usually ask this question to people. Which comes first, vision or desire? Most people say desire. I disagree. I think vision gives you that desire. If you have a big enough vision, it's like pouring gasoline into a car. It gives you that energy to run. It gives you that desire. So let's start with having big vision. The next thing along the way and along my challenges, when I have losses and when I have downs and when I have stops, I had to innovate, to do something different. So just think about when BET was created. There was one black show on television in 1980. It's called The Cosby Show. It's the one black show. That was it. One black show. You had Soul Train, but it was regional at that time, which everybody knows what Soul Train is. But it was regional, but you had one national show. So basically, if we want to sum it, there were two black shows, Soul Train and Cosby. Here we come along to start a network. 24 hours, 7 days a week. How dare you? Who's going to watch that? There's not that many black people around anyway. They don't care. Why are you going to do that? But what we understood is that black culture influenced all culture. Black culture influences all culture. And whether you're talking about dance, or whether you're talking about music, whether you're talking about technology, whether you're talking about fashion, it's now that people are realizing that. And that's why some 40 years later, we're doing better than we did the previous 40 years. And people say, how can that be possible? With every measurable variable, we're better, bigger today than any time of our 40-year history. Sometimes we look at each other and go, thank God. It's just amazing to us because we continue to innovate, create change, reinvent ourselves consistently over and over again. It's our digital business, or whether it's our streaming business, or whether it's our production business, whether it's our strategic partners. We continue to innovate and reinvent ourselves over and over again. That's why it was very interesting to me, this particular program of innovation and change makers. And the projects that you guys took on were amazing. Whether we were talking about innovation of neighborhoods and insecurity around homelessness, or whether it was your gutter app, all those things were just innovative to me. Thinking different, thinking new. It is really the key to our country and its success. Just think, if BET didn't come along, where would the entertainment business today be? Where would I be today? So it is something to that. The next thing is, I get asked this question a lot. I talk about hard work, and young people ask me about hard work all the time. What's the definition of hard work? When it's so hard, you don't think you can do it. That's what hard work is. When it's so hard, you don't believe you can do it. If it's easy to you, it ain't hard work. If it's not challenging to you, it's not hard work, which means that your vision is probably not big enough. And I don't care what age, amen, that you are. Even sometimes today, I just think, I don't know if that's going to work or not. I don't know if I can achieve that or not. I don't know if it's going to happen for me because it's so hard. That's hard work. But in order to do hard work, you have to have capacity. And we talk about that a lot in corporate America, capacity. One of the reasons I accepted this at the end of the day when I realized how hard it was going to be to get here and get out of here, because it built capacity. I won't get home tonight to around about 11:30 or 12. My wife looked at me crazy when I told her that. See you around 12. She's just like, 12? 12 what, tomorrow? I said, tonight. The mental capacity and the physical capacity that I'm building to get this done today will help me in some other space along the line. It's going to help me before the year's out, because I'm going to remember, I said, like, now I went to Iowa State, flew there, drove out of there. Don't happen too often, but it helps me create the capacity that I need to do through other things. So young people, think about that. Everything you do, there is a learning lesson out of it. And make sure that you understand what that lesson is. Like me, when we were doing those classes, I had worked all day long. And sometimes they would surprise me. My assistant, like, you know you got class tonight. Again? I thought we just had it last week. I thought I was on an every other week schedule. I didn't know I was on a weekly schedule. When did this start? It helped me build the capacity that I needed to do other things in my life. The next thing is execution, which you guys were challenged by some of the judges today on, I heard in the presentations. Great idea, but what about this? What about that? How do you execute that? You've got to be able to think through that execution, because it could be a great idea, but it might not be able to be executed in a way that's going to be effective and impactful. It's just like people who are in the School of Architecture and Engineering. My wife has one of those degrees, Lewis, all right? And as she said, just because somebody can draw it don't mean somebody can build it. It's about that execution, the ability to be able to do that. And usually that requires you to get into the details of the plan. So you've got to make sure that in your innovative process that you understand how to execute and be able to make it come to life and have the impact and the influence that you guys want it to have. So as you think about those type of projects, make sure you are in the details from start to finish. And finally, hope you get some waymakers along the way. Waymakers. People who can help you and expect nothing in return. That's what a waymaker is. And that's what most of the educators are in the system. They're waymakers. Every time I speak at an academic institution, I get excited, and I usually tell the students to turn around and give their teachers or their professors a round of applause. Why? Why do you do that? Because most teachers and professors got their own bad kids, all right? That's giving them their own challenges when they get home, all right? And they're spending all this time and emotion and intelligence trying to educate you, motivate you, inspire you to be your best. They're waymakers, intentional waymakers, people who are seeing something in you that you probably can't see in yourself. I got blessed to have 19 waymakers in my career. That's an awful lot of people who cared about me. And of those 19, I didn't include my parents. They were teachers. They were coaches. They were neighbors. They were bosses. They were people who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Some of you have heard the story that I didn't want to go to college. I was a high school All-American, one of the top track people in the country, literally in the top 3 in the country. Free scholarships. I didn't want to go. I thought the post office was a better option. Thought UPS was a better option because I needed a check right then. Most poor people, they want a check tomorrow. They don't want a check 4 years from now or 5 years from now. They want and they need a check. I had to have a village of waymakers convince me that going to college was the right thing to do. And they had to work on me real hard. Well, my mother kind of had a little say-so in it, too. She had a little heavier vote than everybody else. It wasn't really like a question to her. She was just like, I don't know what you're playing around with because I know what you're going to do because I'm going to tell you to do that. But anyway, these waymakers saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. A degree in journalism, that was not my idea. That was a waymaker's idea for me. It's not something that I wanted to do. So I decided to get that degree, but I wanted to be in front of the camera. I don't want to be doing all this stuff behind the camera. As an athlete, you kind of have that big head. You have a lot of ego. So if I got to do this, I might as well be aiming in front of the camera, right? In the money shot, might as well be in the money shot, right? Why do something else? Making sure that you recognize waymakers when they come into your life. Because in order to have waymakers, you have to be this one thing. You got to be coachable. You got to be coachable. Because a waymaker just wants the best for you. They don't want nothing in return. That's what the professors here are doing for you. They're being coachable, trying to help you be coachable. Because it starts here. When you get your first job, trust me, you know nothing. You know nothing. When they interview, they're looking, are you coachable? I remember going on interviews early. I used to tell people what I could do for their companies, and I realized they never paid me any attention. Then I became a boss, and I realized they can do nothing for the company. I got to teach you what to do for the company. So you're continuing your education just in another place. You're always being educated. You're always learning, just in another place for another reason. Be coachable. And that's what happens when you get in front of employers. They're looking, is this young lady coachable? Is this young man coachable? Because we realize you only know so much because you haven't had a lot of experience. So make sure you put yourself in that position to be coachable. And finally, to the faculty, you guys are intentional way makers. But make sure you learn something from these young people along the way, all right? Make sure as you try to change their lives, they change your lives. Make sure you go in with the intention of being different when they leave than when they started. You personally, that's the thing, that's the greatest thing I think about what you guys do as waymakers, that you get something in return. You get rewarded in return, even though it feels like sometimes you're giving it all. But through that experience, you're getting something also in return. When I look over my career and I said, 35, 36 years is a long time. But those years have given me something in return. They've taught me a lot. They've gave me capacity. They've gave me experience. They've gave me a hell of a check, too. It has been an amazing experience and ride. And I want each of you to have the same type of opportunities when you think about what you do. What a pleasure to have been here on this campus, in this building, working with you guys, working with Karen and the faculty. What a pleasure it has been for me. It's been so exciting. I wish you all the best, and I'm always around. Just make sure when I commit that I'm going to come to the campus that I check to see how I can get in here and how I can get out. Thank you guys so very much.
Hello, this is on. I know you have to hit the road as soon as possible, but do you have time for a couple of questions from
Sure.
the audience? Okay.
Sure.
Anybody? I have the mobile mic. Some of our students are here. Now here, I can't just leave him. I can always count on my Kylie here.
Hi, thank you for all of the advice that you gave everyone and for the stories that you've told. You said that you're from Drake, and so going from being a student to finding that forever passion or something that you can stay in for as long as you have stayed in your position, what would be the biggest thing that you would recommend for, really finding that just kind of from the beginning?
Always understand whatever you're doing, whatever you're involved in, it's bigger than you. Whatever it is, it's bigger than you, and find out what that is and who those people are that it can impact and it can help. So many people come up and say, even with my foundation, and you can imagine having a foundation for 20 years, anybody who's worked with a non-for-profit, you have many nights like, why am I doing this? Why can't I just, write a check and move on? But when you hear young people say, the experience changed my life. Really? How? Because coming together with other people who had some of the same issues and the same problems, and you never know what people are going through until they tell you, right? You look at people and they look like, oh, they're having the time of their life. Everything's coming up roses for them. But understand that you're having some type of influence and impact on somebody else in whatever you do, whether it is being a student, whether it is being faculty, whether it is being part of a nonprofit, whether it is innovating, you're always having impact beyond your circle. Understand that as soon as possible, it will change your life. Sooner you understand that life is always bigger than you. And as an employer, that's what we look for too. When people come in, we say, so what organizations were you involved in college? I just studied all the time. So you weren't involved in any other type of organizations that did things for people? Were you involved with a fraternity? Were you involved in the student union? What were you involved in? We're looking to understand, can you be a part of a team? And do you understand that your impact is bigger than just you? It's got to be bigger than yourself. That's why I loved a lot of your projects.
Okay, hi. Thank you. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to hear. I have a personal question. What happens when you have many visions, but not the capacity of execution? What advice would you give to build up your team?
Talk to other people who are experts at it. There's always somebody out there who's really good at it. When I wanted to start this magazine, I had no idea how to do that. I didn't know if I could afford to do it. I didn't know any of that. So I spent some time Googling, and I found a bunch of people that I could talk to about it. And they helped me develop process, systems, teams. I mean, I spent months and months just talking to people to try to understand it. Now, the capacity thing really is an organizational thing. We all have much more capacity than what we believe we have, all right? A teacher, when I was very, very young, told me this stat, and I don't know if it's true or not, Louis, but I believed it, that we as humans only use 10% capacity of our brain. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard it, all right? And I believed it. Thank God I did, because I always, then from that moment on, said, hey, I got more capacity than I'm using to think of answers, solutions, and things like that. So I'm assuming somebody gonna send me an email or whisper to me like, it wasn't true, but I'm glad you believed it. But anyway, it's really an organizational thing. I've had moments in my life where I just thought I was gonna pass out. Early in my career, our headquarters was in Washington, D.C. We had staff meetings on Monday mornings at 10 o'clock, and I had to leave Chicago. So you know what time I had to get up and start that day, like 3:30 in the morning. I left Washington, D.C. that afternoon going to New York, and I wouldn't arrive in New York until like 9 o'clock that night when I left my house at 5 o'clock that morning. Every week. I thought I was gonna die. Just thought I was gonna die. I'm like, how am I gonna have capacity to keep this up for years? I had to do a whole lot of things different, from how I ate to what I did on the weekends, in order to give me the capacity to do that.
Hi, Louis.
Hey.
My question for you is, if you had the opportunity to have all of your personal waymakers in a room and you could say anything to them, what would you say?
Thank you. Thank you. That's the question. That's what I would say to them. Because what a waymaker does is they just look at you and they can see possibilities that you can't see for yourself. And they start to activate on what they see. And sometimes it's not so obvious, and sometimes it is obvious. You know, I've had professors, coaches, neighbors that I thought were just terrible people. I thought they were just such horrible people because they were always on me. They were always pushing me. They were always demanding things of me. And I'm just like, why don't you like me? You know, because, you know, this is just unnecessary for you to be all over me like this. And one of them told me, because I believe in you more than you believe in yourself, just shut me down. Just shut me down.
All right. So on the topic of your waymakers, you've talked about, you know, people growing up, your neighbors, your coaches, your mom. Recently, who's been your most recent waymaker, and how have they impacted your life?
Wow. There are two. One is named Ron Williams, who is the former CEO and chairman of Aetna Insurance Company. I met him at an art gallery, and he gave me a business card. And, you know, I said, huh, okay. And when I turned it over, it was his personal number, which I said, he gave me the wrong card. You know, somebody like him would not be giving a stranger his cell phone number, right? So I never called it. Like a month later, my assistant says, there's a guy by the name of Ron Williams on the phone. And I accepted the call, of course, and I got on the phone, and he said, did you lose my card? Yeah, I did. I did. He said, you're a lie. You didn't lose the card. You just didn't call me. And from that call, he said, I want to have lunch with you because I want to help you. I didn't know with what, but I said, I'll take the free lunch, whatever. So we had lunch, and he said, what's going on in your life? And this was in 2008. I just lost a tremendous amount of money in the market. He wrote on a piece of paper, call this person, it'll never happen to you again if you do what they tell you. This is going to cost you some money, but trust me, it'll never happen again. Call the person met with me, asked me for some money. I'm like, that's an awful lot of money you're asking me for, and I just lost a lot of money. He said, you got to trust somebody. And it did, and it never happened to me again. He's my mentor today. Every single financial decision I make, I run by him, and he can give me an answer in 30 to 60 seconds. Yay, no, maybe. The next one is this guy on the cover of his magazine, Bob Johnson. When I told him about what I was going to do with a brand called Waymaker, he said, what an ugly name, Louis. You've lost your mind. Nobody's going to buy that. Nobody's going to believe in that. I gave him a copy. He called me back 2 weeks later. He said, I've been looking at this magazine trying to find something wrong with it. He said, I've even convinced myself that the name is not that bad. He said, tell me what you want to do. I told him what I want to do. He said, it's not big enough. Let's make it bigger. Let's make the opportunity bigger. Let's get into streaming. Let's get into events. Let's get into podcasts. He's been my waymaker because he says it takes just as much effort to execute on a small idea as it does on a big one. So those are my recent waymakers.
One last question from Jeff.
Being that this is my first time to hear about Waymaker, and I apologize for saying that, is there an awards program connected to Waymakers?
No, but it can be.
I'll run it for you.
All right.
I guess he's going to be my next waymaker.
Yay, all right. Well, that's a great question to end on. And we got to let Louis hit the road so he gets home before midnight. Let's give Louis Carr just a big hand.
Thank you so much, and you guys are doing a great job. I mean, you really are doing a great job. I'm around different types of people all the time, smart people, innovative people, and just upstairs having the conversation with some of the students and faculty, I'm like, these guys are doing a great job. So congratulations, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Louis. We sure appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Louis. Good evening. And before I get started, I just want to thank all the students in here who took on the Change the World challenge. You were all inspiring, and you reminded me of why I do what I do. So I'm the Dean of the University Library here at Iowa State, and you just reminded me how important the research is and how we can support the students to turn your ideas into real, tangible things. So tonight I have the pleasure of introducing one of our alumnus who is changing our world, Dr. Trent Pressler. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree from Iowa State University, a Master's in Agricultural Economics, and a PhD in Horticulture from Cornell University. He is the CEO of Bedell Cellars on Long Island, owner, founder of Prezler Woodshop, and a best-selling author. He has served on the board of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, was chairman of WineAmerica, and worked at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy during the Clinton years. So that's all the background stuff, right? I met Dr. Presler in 2012 when he was invited to campus by the Committee on Lectures to speak as part of the National Affairs series on innovation. He spoke about sustainable practices in viticulture and winemaking. And after 10 years, what struck me was his comment on using local yeast, like how odd that seemed. Under his management, local yeasts were identified, collected, and cultivated for use in Bedell's wine production. This is a detail that kind of reflects his respect for nature and passion for adapting to our local habitats. There's no need to introduce some foreign yeast to the area. And aside from drinking his wine on occasion and remembering how passionate he was about his work and how generous with he must be doing something right. And recently, during the pandemic, I was ordering wine to support wineries that had closed their tasting rooms and were watching their sales decline as restaurants shuttered their doors. Okay, so this is my story, and I'm sticking to it, right? I checked out Bedell's wine website and noticed that Dr. Presler had authored a book called Little and Often. It was a critically acclaimed bestseller. It's a beautifully written memoir that gently weaves together social, cultural, and environmental issues through a personal journey. I highly recommend reading it. Dr. Presler calls himself a maker, a winemaker, a boat builder, crafting wood strip canoes. He's also an entrepreneur, establishing Presler Woodshop before even making one single canoe. Seems a little presumptuous. You'll have to read the book to find out why. From his memoir, I glimpsed more than a maker and entrepreneur, more than a successful CEO. He is a social and civic innovator, an advocate for social justice, a caretaker of our environment, a storyteller, and a creative thinker who is changing our world for the better. Please welcome Dr. Trent Pressler.
So generous. Perfect. Wow. Thank you, Hillary. Gosh, I got goosebumps. That's one of the most generous introductions I've ever heard. I really appreciate that very much. And thank you for your support of my winery during the COVID shutdown. Turns out people drank a lot in lockdown. I see Jeff Johnson is here. I would just like to recognize my old friend Jeff. He's the president of the Alumni Association, and I was on his board for a few years and had a tremendous experience, and I've known Jeff now 15 years, maybe. And it was a surprise seeing you here today, and I'm so glad I did. And I do hope you partner up with Lewis on the Waymaker program. Like, that's a winning combination, you two guys. It is such a treat to be back at Iowa State. And was anyone in the room here for my guest lectures, like it was about 2 months ago? Okay, maybe half the room. Okay, I thought this might be the case, so I was like, I have to try not to repeat material. So I have some new thoughts to share with you. I was so inspired judging the student competition earlier today. It was a little like a Shark Tank, but not quite so, but not mean like Shark Tank. And just inspired. I'm at the end going to Hillary and Jim and I kind of contemplated them, and I have like the envelope here. But I want to say a few things before that. Lewis said something really struck me, which was that life will not just be about one thing. And that is so true. It's been so true in my life. And I have found at so many parts of my life, there's these moments where I realize I'm at some sort of a fork in the road where life is no longer going to be about the one thing that it has been about before. And there really are so many possibilities, and as undergrads or even grad students, parts of the university community, it might seem overwhelming because you're like, well, what are the possibilities? What will I do? And kind of the beauty of this whole process for you is that you don't know yet. It will be revealed to you, but I promise if you stick with the process, you'll get there. Has anyone here seen the movie Ratatouille? Or do you remember the movie? Okay, everyone. Great movie. And so there's my two favorite parts of the movie are when he tastes the ratatouille finally and he drops the fork and he remembers his mom, right? But the best line from that movie, I think, is when he says that not everyone can be a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. And you have to believe that you can be that person, the person that you want to be. There's also this song by the Pogues from the 80s. It was a Christmas song called The Bells of New York, and it was this like hippie drunk band from London. But they made this video, and there's one line from that song that always sticks with me. And he's kind of lamenting to his ex-girlfriend about where his life went wrong. And he says, I could have been someone. And she says, so could anyone. I could have been someone, but so could anyone. So the opportunities are there for you. And you don't have any limitations, really, even if you think you might. So I have a theory about life, and Hillary indicated a few of my past accomplishments. I did write a book called Little and Often, and that's related to one of my theories of life, which is that everything in this world happens through slow, incremental change, both good and bad. So I look back on my life, and the only way I can imagine that I build a boat in the end when it's floating on the ocean is by putting on one strip of wood at a time, and then leaving, letting the glue dry, and come back the next day. And over the course of a year, by magic, somehow you've built a boat. The same thing was true with my PhD at Cornell. Looking back after it was finished, I'm like, I can't believe I did all that work. How did I do all that work? Oh my gosh. The only way that that work happened was little and often, was a little bit at a time. There are also tragic things that happen little and often, like cancer, and the way our bodies slowly kind of fail us with time. And those aren't things that we often talk about in American culture, but I embrace the little and often mentality in all things, good and bad. But I have another really firm belief about life, and I call it the divining rod theory. So the number one question I get asked all the time is, but how? So you were a White House intern, but how did you get the White House internship? You make wine. Well, how did you start making wine? You build boats, but how did you start building boats? Everyone wants to know my origin story for all of these things. And for years, I would get asked those questions and not really have a great answer. I would be like, well, you know, this, that, and this, and that, and the other thing. And but then it kind of dawned on me that there is a moment in all of your lives when like a worm turns, and you may not see it or recognize it right now, but years later, you might. So when people say, how did you get a White House internship? I say, well, let's go back to my junior year at Iowa State, and I was doing a senior research project with a professor in botany named Rob Wallace, and I was looking at biodiversity in tropical forests. And I read a book called Biodiversity and Human Health, which was part of required reading for one of his classes. And I had all kinds of questions about this book. And I was talking to the professor, and I said, what should I do? I want to ask, you know, all these questions. He said, why don't you write a letter to the author? And the author was the director of the biodiversity program at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. So in August or September, I think, of 1997, here at Iowa State, I wrote a letter and mailed a letter to this guy at the NIH. So he wrote back. This was back when people wrote letters. And he wrote back, and we started a conversation, and then I ended up moving to Maryland for a summer internship with him and was his predoctoral research assistant at the NIH. And he was on the Clinton administration's advisory committee on the United Nations Convention to Biological Diversity, which means a bunch of important people get around a giant conference room table at the State Department every month. And he was like running late. He's like, I'm going to this meeting, and I need you to come to this meeting because it's important, and I want you to take notes. Just take a legal pad. This is not like laptop time. This is 1997, right? So come with me. So we get in a taxi, and we get to the State Department, and we have our badges, our security clearance, and we're late for the meeting, and it's like a Washington, D.C. summer day, like 110 degrees and humid, and we're fully sweated through our double-breasted olive green polyester suits, 1997, remember. And so we scramble in, we sit down, and there's a giant conference table with maybe 50 people, and then a row of chairs around the back side of the conference table, okay? So we're so late that we have to sit in the second tier of chairs. And we sit down, and the chair of the committee's already speaking, and another woman kind of runs in, also late and also sweaty, and she sits in the chair next to me. And so we spend the next hour, and I'm taking notes for my boss, and she's frantically taking notes too. And so then at the end of the meeting, we stand up, and I introduce myself to her, and she says, "Hi, I'm Deanna Baring. I am President Clinton's science advisor." "Oh, hi." Person I sat next to randomly at a meeting that I was late for. We started chatting. She knew my boss from the NIH, and as they say, the rest is history. But that was a divining rod moment. So people like, "But how'd you get a White House internship?" I sent a letter from Iowa State to a person in Washington, and then I sat next to this person at a meeting. Those are things I didn't recognize in the moment, but many years later, I figured it out. People say, "But how did you get into winemaking?" Well, I went to Cornell for my master's. I was studying agricultural economics. I had a background in farming, and I was assigned to a professor, Jerry White, who's now passed. But he sat me down. He said, "I have 2 grants. You can work on either the tulip and the cut flower trade from the Netherlands, or you can work on local wine." I said, I was 22 years old. Well, I'll do wine. And now I've been CEO of a winery for 20 years. So when people say, "But how?" It was that meeting sitting with my professor. People ask me, "But how did you write a best-selling memoir? How in the world did you do that? When did that start, and how did that happen?" Well, there's a very long story. You can read the book to figure it all out. But the condensed version is that when my father died in 2014, I inherited his toolbox. I used his tools to build a wooden canoe. And after I finished the canoe, it was 2017, there was a local beat reporter on Long Island. Her name was Randy Dodona. And notice I'm saying all these people's names out loud, and I think they are the wayfarers that Lewis was talking about. Randy was kind of this flaky photographer for Newsday, little kooky. She said, "I want to come to your shop and shoot photos and video of you building your canoe. I heard through a friend of a friend that you're building a canoe." I said, "Okay, sure, come to my shop." She spent 2 days taking video content, interviewing me, and I was kind of getting irritated because it was a lot of time. And she said, "One last thing is I want to get video footage of you paddling your canoe on the ocean." And it was February. So we waited till there was a perfectly calm day and the tides were right and there was no wind where it wouldn't be super dangerous. And there was this day in February when it was like this light, fluffy snow coming down over the ocean and no wind. And so I took the canoe out on, and she filmed the whole thing wearing scuba gear. And then she left. She disappeared. I didn't speak to her for 6 months. And then I was actually skiing in Italy with friends, and my cell phone rang, and it was her. And she said, "Oh, remember that little video I shot of you? I just got nominated for an Emmy." So it turned out okay. And so I thought, okay, wow. So I went to the Emmys with her, and she won the Emmy in 2018 for Outstanding Short Lifestyle Feature Documentary about my life. So, but how did I write a book? there was a literary agent named Adam who saw the Emmy Awards and watched the video and emailed me and said, I saw the story, you have to write a book. Like this has got book written all over it. So, and he encouraged me and I got a book deal and the rest is history. But how do I build boats? Well, I took a call from a crazy local beat reporter. So the theme here is that you may not have the answers right now. In time in life, you will kind of, I think, look back and maybe see some turning points and moments when, oh yeah, right, that happened. They're the forks in the road. I promise you they will happen. And I guess the question I pose to all of you, and especially the students, is are you ready for those moments? Are you going to be ready to change? Are you going to be ready to accept defeat? Ready to accept the things that you're good at and that you're not good at? Will you be ready to stop when you should and start again? And I think only after all of those things are you then ready to innovate and to change the world. So you have to, you all have a lot of great big ideas. And I think you have to also really make yourself into a closer and learn how all the big ideas start with something very small, very discreet. Sending a letter to somebody, sitting next to someone at a meeting and introducing yourself to them. Like, that's the only way you will ever get down the path of making big change, is by starting with something very, very small. So I don't know what our time frame is like. We're okay, because well, life can change on a dime, you know, and like I could not have told you when I knew Jeff. My father passed away when I was on the board, and you know, I was just running a winery. I could never have imagined that like my life would have changed in the way it did after building the boat and then writing a book, and now we're working on a movie deal. And the next thing people say is, but how'd you get a movie deal? Well, I went to a friend's wedding in Morocco and sat next to her lawyer, and her entertainment lawyer in LA manages celebrities, and he takes like book and written content and helps produce them. And again, it's just about like being in a situation and recognizing that it's a moment that might change your life or it might not. And the other thing is that I have to say, the might not part is important too. Because like not everything in life is this big dramatic thing. And sometimes I've caught myself like seeking out and looking for things that maybe aren't there. And the times in my life when I've maybe gotten myself in trouble or have done things that, not trouble, but just sort of overzealous might be the times when I was trying to overthink things and force them into to happen, when really the best things in my life have all just kind of happened to these discrete changes. I did want to just read one thing to you in closing. Let me just make sure I hit all my notes. I think I did. Just going back, Ratatouille. Not everyone can be a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. And the Pogues, I could have been someone, but so could anyone. I have a good friend in New York. She wrote a poem, and this poem really speaks to me, and it may not be like on-the-nose innovation, but I want to think about, I want you all to think about the things that I've said also in the context now of this poem. The poem is called Starfish. And the first line says a lot to me. It just says, this is what life does. Life lets you walk up to the store to buy breakfast and the paper. Life lets you do all of that with a stiff knee. Life lets you choose the way you have your eggs and your coffee. Then life sits a fisherman down beside you at the counter, and he says, last night the channel was full of starfish. And you wonder to yourself, is this a message? Is this a sign? Finally. Or is this just another day? Life lets you take the dog for a walk down to the pond where whole generations of biological processes are boiling beneath the mud. Reeds speak to you of the natural world. They whisper, they sing. And herons fly by. are you old enough to appreciate this moment? Or maybe too old? There is movement beneath the water, but it also may be nothing. There actually may be nothing going on. And then life suggests that you remember the years that you ran around and the years that you developed a shocking lifestyle, advocated careless abandon, owned a chilly heart, and upon reflection, you are genuinely surprised to find how quiet you have become. And then life lets you go home to think about all this, which you do for quite a long time. This is life's way of letting you know that you're lucky. It won't always give you smart or brave, so you'll have to settle for lucky sometimes. Because you were born at a good time, because you were able to listen to people when they spoke to you, and because you stopped when you should have stopped and knew when to start again. So life lets you have a sandwich and a pie for dessert and pie for your dog too. And then life sends you back to bed to dreamland, while outside, the channel is full of those starfish, and they drift through it with smiles on their starry faces as they head out to deep water, to the far and boundless sea. You can decide for yourself if you are one of the starfish, or if you're the old man that sits down at the counter and proclaims that it's another day, or if you're the person ordering their eggs on a stiff knee. The pie, you want to be the pie. That's good. Eleanor Lerman, yes. It's my favorite. So I guess I can take a couple questions maybe, and then I am tasked with doing the awards. Okay. Some water.
Hello, it's on. I got a blue light. First question. You mentioned the divining rod metaphor in the beginning, and I'm curious if you had thoughts on those forks in the road and how that divining rod in your life helped you choose. So, for instance, had you not written that letter, or let's say you wrote that letter to the NIH person, and you could have said, oh, I'm going to stay and do a postdoc, and you could have been a professor of botany. So there's a lot of opportunities. Right. Is there a way to what's your advice on when you're faced with those forks in the road?
Well, I would say that more often than not, I chose the riskier path. I chose the path that was uncomfortable, dangerous, and might put me at financial risk. My parents were very poor cattle ranchers in South Dakota, and I took this unpaid White House internship. And I'm telling you, and I have a photo to prove it, there were 200 White House interns in my summer of '98, which is the Monica Lewinsky summer. There was one person of color in the entire White House intern class, and I swear everyone went to Harvard. And I felt like such an other. Even though I present as cis white male, I'm gay. I grew up in a really poor part of South Dakota. I went to a one-room schoolhouse, and I put my entire summer living expenses on credit cards because I really believed it was important for me to go do that. And it did change my life. So I think there are moments when you have the divining rod decision, and like if you can take the one that might be riskier somehow and not put yourself in danger, but like Lewis said, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of times in my life, I've made myself very uncomfortable. Yes. Oh, we gotta wait for the microphone.
All right, yeah, so just talking about that, you just mentioned you came from a one-room schoolhouse. A lot of people around here have, I guess, sort of grown up in that traditional route. You know, you live in the suburbs, blah, 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 you grow up like that. I'm making huge assumptions, but I want to talk a little bit about the immigrants' mindset, a little bit. Having faced adversity growing up and then finding yourself somewhere. Like, how did I get here? Could you tell me just a little bit about, you know, as a boy growing up in South Dakota, going to a one-room schoolhouse, could you have possibly imagined where you are now?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the beauty of it is that you actually can't imagine either what's next. Every year on the New Year's Day, or New Year's Eve, I think to myself, wow, look what happened in the last year. I could never have predicted any of it. And I know, even though we fight against this, I know that what happens in the next year will be completely beyond my comprehension too. People die, you get new jobs, whatever. Lots of things happen. Wars break out. And you do find yourself in places, I think, where you're uncomfortable and where, I suppose, although I can't directly relate to the sort of feeling of being an immigrant, I do think that there's a universal feeling of being an outsider. And I felt that at many, many times in my life. And I still do sometimes, you know, like, and that's never really kind of goes away, I think, if you come from some sort of hardship. Basically, if you're not a straight white guy that went to Harvard, I think you're an outsider in this country. Sorry, I'm bashing Harvard, but it's easy to do.
Thank you.
Having listened to you last time and again today, there's one thing that I noticed, that you surrender yourself to the process always. Could you speak a little bit about it? Like, how do you stay at that, and how does that feel like?
Oh, wow. There are moments when I'm absolutely terrified. What have I done? I've bitten off more than I can chew. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? And I have to just remind myself, like, fall back into the process, you know, go to the shop and glue up some wood, and do that every day for the next 3 months, and eventually you'll get there. But it's very, very, I know the moments when I get uncomfortable, or I'm just like, oh, I'm totally overcommitted, and this is wild, and what am I doing? And it's also important, I think, to admit those times too, where it's not always going to be fully under your control. And but the process and the trend is your friend, right? The process kind of determines everything, and as much as you can, try to find a process for yourself, I think. There's a student there that had a question. I assume you're a student. Sorry, I shouldn't assume things.
Hi, thank you for your speech, Trent. I'm a grad student. My name is Chidinma, and I can relate with you on your unpaid internship with a bunch of Harvard students heavily. That's part of the reason why I'm here today. If I didn't have a similar experience, I probably wouldn't have gone down that path. But my question is, you mentioned like having to do a lot of things that are not related to the thing that you want to do, and how life, you know, according to Lewis Carr, like life will never be aligned so you can pursue straight on. And that's even more true for people who have like very imminent things that they have to take care of, like family or sick people, or, you know, they need to make money. So sometimes they drop out to get a job because they just can't afford to take that nice internship or stay in school. Having been in that situation and somewhat crawling out of that, how do you, I guess, like, how do you know when like something is like a real opportunity you should be chasing to kind of give up? So let's say you've had lots of things that you've sort of given up. You've done the working hard, you've done the studying, you've done the internships, and you're still sort of struggling. When is that next step that you're like, okay, I've done all these things and I'm good, but I'm still struggling? When do I know that this is a good? And maybe you could share how many failures you've had.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, you asking that question, I got this like real heavy feeling, because I was remembering, you know, basically my broken, careless years in my 20s. So when I was 14, my parents were on welfare. Our cattle ranch went bankrupt. My sister was in a wheelchair. She had cerebral palsy. And I was basically told that if you want your Air Jordan sneakers or whatever you want for your jeans, your Guess jeans, you have to get a job and pay for them yourself. And so I worked at a Burger King for 40 hours a week, starting at age 14 all the way through high school for 4 years, in addition to school and everything else. And there came a moment when my first summer after Iowa State, I had the choice to go back home and just work all summer and make money, or I applied for a scholarship through the honors program to go to Mexico and study Spanish language. I just thought, oh, I should just maybe do something different, and if I can get someone else to pay for it, then it might be okay. And it was like gut-wrenching because my instinct was to like clamp down and work and make money. And I went, and it was, it didn't really change my life that much. I came home with an Australian accent. I didn't even learn Spanish because I was in a dorm. I was in a dorm with a bunch of Australian students. My mom was like, "You sound like you're from Australia, but can you speak any Spanish?" So Iowa State paid for that. Thank you. It was great. But I know that it's, there's in economics, they talk often about constrained decision making, and when you have all the resources in the world, it's a lot easier. And when you're limited and you have to decide between X, Y, and Z based on a limited budget, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And it's very hard. I do also recognize my privilege, and that I've been in situations and I've met people that have really helped me along the way. And I don't discount that at all. I don't know if I'm even answering your question or if I'm just like lamenting the state of the world, but I would say stick with it. And there's, in our student groups earlier, you guys threw up balloons, and throwing the balloons in the air, it was like, the analogy was that you have to balance all these things, and there was family and work and life and relationships, and it's not easy. I mean, nothing about this whole journey is easy for anyone. And I would, I encourage you to stick with it. And whenever possible, ask for help. Like Lewis said, there were people in his life that came at a certain moment and really like helped him to the next stage. And I think sometimes we get paralyzed, whether we're limited, we think we're limited by our decisions, or maybe no one's there to help us. Especially in a university like Iowa State, if you ask for help, whether it's academic help or you talk to your professor or something and just say like, I've got all this going on and I'm limited in time, but I want to do this internship, but I need to work. And maybe someone will, have a different idea that you don't see for yourself. So don't be afraid of that. And there's no shame in asking for help. And I really think all these people that have changed my life and Lewis's life were happy to do so. They'll be happy to help you.
Any others?
Oh, the number of failures.
Oh.
What's that?
The number of failures.
Oh, the
Shadima
failures.
asked, yeah.
Well, oh God. I mean, building my first canoe was a complete disaster. And I wrote about that in my book, like all the things I did terribly wrong. I messed up this book, like cutting the wood in strips. I glued myself to the floor at one point, like I was actually in over my head and completely losing my mind. I also, many times I have felt like I've kind of failed at parts of my day job. I often don't feel like I'm the best manager of people. I just want people to like get it right and do it, And so I have been frustrated sometimes about, trying to cultivate a good team. Gosh. I mean, there are more. There are also a lot of personal ones. But I think that the most important thing to take away from failure is just, are you ready to pick yourself up and say, well, that sucked. Now what? Like, what happens now? Like, am I going to wallow in this or learn from it and try to move on and do something else? So.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
So many times when we are talking about like the road less traveled or finding years later, and I really appreciate the fact that you said, I only figured it out like a couple of years later that thing happened in my life. Do you have the opposite of when you have a rejection or something didn't go, and having that like ability to slow down the stomach and say, this happened for a reason, and something is about, if you can tell us a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I got fired from a job once. So when I was in graduate school at Cornell, to make money on the side, I was a general manager of a local restaurant. Because I worked at Burger King in high school, I thought, well, I can do this, right? But it was like a fine dining establishment, and it had a very particular owner. Her name was Pleasant Rowland. She was the founder of American Girl Dolls Company, which she sold to Mattel for $1 billion. And then she bought a restaurant in upstate New York. And she owns now a company called Mackenzie Childs, which is like a homewares company. So I ran this restaurant for her, and she kind of ruled this restaurant like it was her domain, right? Like she would close the restaurant for evenings just so she could come in and dine with her friends. And then I would like have to dote on them. And I was tired from grad school. I was studying and writing my thesis. And yeah, basically I got fired from the job. And it's the only time I've been fired. And it was really a gut punch. And I was like, I know this isn't my career. I'm not going to be a restaurant manager in my life. And I was in a Cornell economics grad program. But it like really affected me. And I thought, well, what is this? What's the cause of this? And I was really overcommitted. And I was stretched so thin. I would come to the restaurant like completely fried from class, and then I'd have to work on my thesis after the restaurant closed, and like really just like pushing my limits beyond what was even practical. So that was the result, and I got fired. So yeah, it was healthy.
Well, thank you, Trent. Gentlemen, did you have another? Oh, more failures? No.
So what do you recommend, like if going back to where you were, you had 3 opportunities, but pursuing all of them was gonna run you down.
Well,
what would you have focused on now that you're looking back? What kind of opportunity would you focus on?
Right. Well, I would try to be very specific with yourself about what your goals are. So like if your long-term goal was to be a doctor, then you should focus maybe on taking that internship at a hospital. I think that the more specific and discreet you can be with yourself and not get lost in the clouds about the decisions, the better off you'll be. So just if you have to make the decision between a couple of opportunities, and it is a problem today, there are a lot of opportunities, and it's total ADD culture, like it's very distracting. Saturday Night Live did a skit last Saturday about TikTok, which is genius. It was maybe one of the best skits ever on Saturday Night Live because it was every 2 seconds was a completely new scene. And not just like a little new, it was like grandma getting a foghorn. 2 seconds later, baby bunny rabbit. 2 seconds later, like it was just, and it's just whiplash. And I do think that students today are being whiplashed like back and forth with like many different options. So just try to focus yourself, steady yourself, and like, and make yourself into a closer. I know that sounds just flippant, but like, be a closer for yourself.
What's a closer? She says, what's a closer?
Someone that can implement and execute. So don't just have the big idea, but like think specifically about how will I make this idea happen on a very specific and discrete level. And that's a great segue into our Innovation Awards.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so I'm gonna be helping, but Trent is going to be announcing.
Okay.
So so what went on this afternoon, our Change the World Challenge happened. This is a challenge that's sponsored by the College of Design, the College of Business, and our great library. So Dean Hilary Seo was a judge, as well as Trent, and I was enlisted as well to be a judge, but so bear that in mind. But we saw, I'd say about 12 or 14 ideas that were pitched, right?
Yeah.
And we decided to support 3 of those projects. So Trent, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll do the handoff. You do the announcement.
Okay. So we decided on a second place, and then we have 2 that tied for first place. So the second place award goes to the Cyclones Vote 2.0 group, which consists of Faith Toa, Mallory Tope, Justin Hollenrake, Alyssa Rodriguez, and DeMarcus Hurd. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So the award for that is $2,000.
Yes.
And I just want to say that your project was so commendable in that there are a lot of people trying right now to get disenfranchised groups and underrepresented minorities to not vote. Mm-hmm. And their project, if you don't know, like they're going to get out the vote at Iowa State. They've already started the work. They're registering people and students, and it was really admirable and important work, I think.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. great.
Let's see. Let's do this one. Let me find. I was
Yep,
gonna
get
read
the
this
names. That's
here.
good.
I put it right here somewhere. Oh yeah.
Tied for first.
So tied for first, we have The Unfinished Project, and that was the brainchild of Sarah Ng.
Yes.
Come on up, Sarah.
Sarah.
Congratulations. And this is a cash award of $4,000.
Yes. Congratulations, Sarah.
Sarah is like a dynamo. Her presentation was fabulous, like so spot on. You have a bright career ahead of you, a bright future. And just like a quick synopsis, she's going to develop a project boxes for students in STEM that at a younger age,
Yep,
right?
middle school students, right? And an online component and a physical component that's reusable. Fantastic idea.
Yeah.
So-
No, I think you're going to nail it. It's
Yeah.
very exciting. So congratulations. And then our other tied for first, I got to find where I put this. Is it on the other side?
Could be.
Yeah. I just want to read the names of everyone.
Yeah.
Here
There
it
it
is.
is, yes. Okay.
The Neighborhood Project.
Congratulations, come on
So,
up.
Alyssa Rodriguez and Eamon Carmi.
Yep.
So their project is intended at addressing houselessness, homelessness on Iowa State's campus specifically. And it's a really noble project, and I found it very emotional and moving that you both reflected your personal journeys. Alyssa's parents passed away before you were 18, and you came from the Middle East, right? And they both experienced this personally. And I think it's so powerful that you took a personal experience and made it universal and tried to help other people through it. Yes?
Nothing about us without us.
It's so great. So I hope you help. I know you're going to help housing insecurity in Ames.
Yes.
And what you're doing is really important, and I want you to know that.
You're welcome. And both, please. Did we mention that?
Oh, that's $4,000 also.
Yes. So, yes, first place. And I will wrap us up. Well, I want to thank Trent and Lewis Carr, our keynote speakers, and certainly Trent for his help in our judging today. You're around tomorrow? No? No, he's leaving tomorrow morning. Okay. Well, he got to see his canoe partially made in the exhibit space, so we're going to try and finish that and continue to engage Trent as we go forward here with our innovation programming. So with that, I think we should wrap it up. Thanks to the staff and everybody who put this together, our wonderful AV staff up there capturing all the action. This will all be streamed on YouTube. And congratulations to our winners, and thank you all for attending. So we'll see you soon.